You have a dictionary, and you'd like to look up a key that might not be in the dictionary. How can you set the default values for your dictionary's keys? Let's take a look at the many ways to approach this problem in Python. Instead of relying on a key error being raised when a missing key is looked up, or instead of checking whether the key is in our dictionary before we look it up, we could use the dictionary get method. This is the classic way to look up a value for a dictionary key without raising an exception for missing keys. The get method accepts two arguments, the key to look up and the default value to use if that key isn't in the dictionary. The second argument defaults to none. The get method doesn't modify the dictionary. But what if we want to modify our dictionary? Let's say we have a list of item objects and we want to group these items together based on their color. We could use a for loop and the in operator to assign a dictionary key to a new list the first time we see each key in our dictionary. Or we could use the dictionary setDefault method. The setDefault method will assign a given key to a given value, but only if that key isn't already in the dictionary. So the setDefault method is doing that if check for us. But the setDefault method actually does slightly more than just set the default value. This method also returns the value of the key, either the existing one or the new one. So you'll sometimes see the setDefault method used like this. We're looking up the current value for a dictionary key, defaulting that value to an empty list, and then appending to that key's value, all in one line of code. Personally, it took me a while to get used to this variation of setDefault. It's a very handy shorthand now that I'm used to it, but use this cautiously if you feel your coworkers might find it confusing. What if we already know all of the keys that need default values when we first make our dictionary? Here we're making a dictionary of the months 1 to 12, and we're manually setting all of them to 0. We could have instead used the dict class's fromkeys class method to make our dictionary from an iterable of numbers from 1 through 12. We'll end up with the same dictionary either way. Note that the second argument to fromkeys is optional. If it's not given, it will default to none. What would happen if we passed a list to fromkeys? For example, let's say we'd like to create a dictionary of all runtimes of a number of tasks, where the dictionary keys will be the task names and the values will be a list of all of the runtimes, like this dictionary we made here. Now, we don't have our dictionary right now. Our goal is to create this dictionary. We might start that dictionary by using the fromkeys method to pre-populate the dictionary values to an empty list, and then loop over our data to populate those lists. But that doesn't work the way we expected it to. Every value was set to the same list. We wanted to set each dictionary key to an empty list, and the fromkeys method does do that in a sense. But fromkeys set each value to exactly the same object. So if we modify this list, we'll see that all of the lists change because they're the same list. The fromkeys method doesn't attempt to copy the object you give it. Instead, it just references the same object for every key in the dictionary. This works great for numbers, strings, and other immutable objects, but not so great for mutable objects like lists. If you do need to use a mutable object as a dictionary value, use a dictionary comprehension instead. Using a dictionary comprehension will ensure that each value ends up being a separate empty list. What if you want every key lookup that you ever perform on your dictionary to have a default value? In that case, you could use the collections.defaultdict class. The defaultDict class accepts a factory function that it'll use for the value of each missing key lookup. If we hadn't known our task names before we created our runtimes dictionary before, we could use the setDefault method to default each value to an empty list. Or we could instead use collections.defaultdict by passing the list callable to it. The defaultDict class is handy, but I find that I rarely feel the need to use it. When I find that I need the default values for specific keys while building up a dictionary, I usually use the regular dict class, along with the get method, the setDefault method, or the fromkeys method. I only use defaultdict when I want a dictionary that never raises key error exceptions and always gives a default value for every key instead, unless collections.Counter would be better suited for my problem. Let's say we're counting how many times we see each item in a given iterable. Instead of using a dictionary or defaultdict to count up these colors, we could use collections.Counter to do the counting for us. It's easy to overdo it when defaulting dictionary values. The next time you need to set dictionary default values, I recommend starting at the top of this list and working your way downward. The first options, like containment checks and the get method, are the simplest, and the latter options, like counter and defaultdict, are more sophisticated. Sophisticated isn't necessarily bad, but don't use a more complex option if a simpler one might be easier to read and easier to maintain.